Hey there, fellow dog lovers. Welcome back to our channel, where we shine a spotlight on the incredible bond between humans and their four-legged heroes. Now buckle up, because tonight's tale isn't your average feel-good story. This one starts in the unlikeliest of places, a rainy night at Hudson Valley Medical Center in New York. Picture the chaos, phones ringing, stretchers rushing by, doctors barking orders. And then suddenly, silence. Every head turns as the automatic doors slide open. And what walks in isn't a paramedic or even a frantic parent. It's a Labrador retriever, soaked to the bone, paws, bleeding eyes burning with determination. And across his back, a small boy, unconscious, barely clinging to life. I don't know about you, but that moment gave me chills. Because dogs don't just stumble into hospitals with children on their shoulders. That takes purpose. That takes loyalty. That takes something more. And trust me, this is only the beginning. Because what started as a miracle would unravel into a mystery of survival, sacrifice, and the kind of family you can't buy, can't fake, only find. So grab a blanket, settle in, and let's dive into the story of Harbor the Labrador who refused to let go. They say heroes don't always wear capes. But that night in the middle of chaos, a Labrador proved heroes sometimes walk on four legs. It was one of those nights where everything felt heavy. Rain hammered the pavement. Thunder rolled somewhere far away, and the emergency room at Hudson Valley Medical Center buzzed with the usual Monday chaos. Phones rang, stretchers wheeled through narrow halls. Voices overlapped in urgent tones. It was noise, pure noise, until the moment the automatic doors hissed open. And then, silence. Clipboards froze mid-air. A nurse's coffee slipped from her hands, splashing across the floor in a slow-motion arc. Even the usual beeping of heart monitors seemed to hesitate, like the building itself was holding its breath. Because standing in that doorway was not a person. It was a dog. Not just any dog, a Labrador retriever drenched from head to tail, water dripping off his fur in little rivers. His paws were torn raw, leaving smudges of mud and blood on the sterile tiles. His chest heaved with exhaustion, but his eyes dark, steady, desperate, locked straight ahead. And across his back, slumped like a rag doll, was a child, a boy. No more than 7 or 8. His skin-pale shirt ripped, one sneaker missing. His head lolled lifelessly to the side. Blood soaked the Labrador's back, running in rivulets down his ribs. The dog trembled under the weight, but didn't stumble. He stood unshaken, like he had carried the boy across half the world just to get him here. For a long heartbeat, no one moved. And then the whispers began. "Oh my God! Did he just..." One nurse? Clara Jensen stepped forward before anyone else found the courage. Mid-30s, sharp but kind-eyed, she felt something primal stirring in her chest. Not fear, not even shock. Something protective. Something maternal. She crouched low, palms out, like approaching a wild creature. "Hey there, buddy. It's okay. We're here to help." The Labrador's lips twitched, a low rumble in his throat. Not aggressive, just exhausted warning, like a soldier too tired to fight, but unwilling to surrender. For a moment, Clara thought he might collapse right there. Then it happened. The boy's arm slipped from the dog's shoulder and dangled limp, a streak of crimson trailing across the Labrador's muddy fur. That was the breaking point. Clara lunged. She scooped the boy into her arms, nearly buckling from the sudden weight. "Gurney, trauma bay now," she shouted. The room snapped back to life. Alarms blared, sneakers squeaked across polished floors, and the boy disappeared behind swinging double doors. But the dog, he stayed. Bleeding, shaking, dripping rainwater, he sat by the trauma room door, pressing his nose to the glass every time a monitor beeped inside. And suddenly, the question wasn't just, who is this child? It was, who is this dog? Because here's the truth. Strays don't walk into hospitals carrying unconscious children. That's not instinct. That's intention. That's loyalty. That's something else. And that night, every single person in Hudson Valley Medical Center knew it. They weren't just looking at a stray dog. They were looking at a mystery. A savior. Maybe even a miracle. But miracles come with questions. Who was the boy? What had happened to him? And how on earth did this Labrador know exactly where to go? The silence of that first moment shattered into a storm of urgency. Doctors fought for the boy's life. Administrators whispered about liabilities. And through it all, the dog, bleeding, weary but unrelenting, refused to move. He wasn't leaving, not without the boy. And that was only the beginning. The boy was whisked into trauma bay as doctors and nurses moved with surgical urgency. IV lines, oxygen mask voices overlapping in clipped commands. Pulses weak. Blood pressure crashing. "Get me 2 units now." Clara stood just outside the doors, her scrub streaked with the boy's blood. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest. She had seen plenty of emergencies in her 10 years as a nurse, but nothing like this. Nothing that began with a dog walking through the ER doors. And speaking of the dog, the Labrador was still there, sitting, waiting. Bleeding quietly onto the tiles, his ribs rising and falling with labored breaths. His eyes, however, never left the glass window of the trauma room. Each time the monitor inside gave a high-pitched beep, his ears flicked. Each time a nurse brushed past, he lifted his head nose, pressed to the cold surface, as if trying to will himself back inside. To anyone else, he might have looked like a stray. But Clara felt it, this dog wasn't lost. He had purpose. That's when Detective Jonah Ruiz arrived. Rain dripping from his leather jacket eyes, sharp voice gruff. He glanced once at the Labrador and frowned. "Who's responsible for this animal?" Clara shot him a look. "Responsible? He carried that boy in here." Ruiz arched an eyebrow. "Dogs don't just do that. Not without a reason." And there it was, the question that no one dared say out loud. Why this dog? Why this boy? Hours crawled by. The boy stabilized but remained unconscious. No identification, no records. Just bruises, old ones and new, painting a story no one wanted to hear. Abuse, neglect, maybe worse. Clara returned to the hallway and crouched beside the Labrador. His fur was matted with dried blood, his paws raw and torn. She whispered softly as if he could understand. "You didn't just find him, did you? You brought him here because you knew." The dog lifted his head, eyes glassy but intent. And in that moment, Clara swore she saw something human flicker inside them. A question, a plea, a bond. Still, hospital administration wasn't convinced. Mr. Harding, the risk-averse supervisor, marched down the hall already waving a clipboard. "This dog is a liability," he barked. "If he bites someone, if he carries disease, he goes." Security hovered nearby, waiting for the order. But Clara stood up, planting herself between them. "If he goes, I go." The room froze again. Security hesitated. Even Harding faltered. Because Clara wasn't bluffing, and everyone knew it. She wasn't just defending a dog, she was defending the very soul of that little boy, fighting for his life. From that moment on, the Labrador wasn't just tolerated. He was allowed to stay. Night bled into morning. Rain softened into mist outside. Shift changes came and went. And still the Labrador, still nameless, still bleeding, never left his post by the ICU glass. Then the first crack of light broke through. The boy stirred. His chest rose with a deeper breath, his eyelids fluttered, and for the first time since arriving, he whispered a single word. So faint, Clara had to lean in to catch it. Harbor. The name hung in the air like a revelation. The Labrador's ears perked. His tail thumped weakly against the floor. Harbor. The boy had given him a name. Or maybe, just maybe, he had spoken the name he already knew. Clara's throat tightened. She whispered it back, tasting the sound. Harbor. And in that moment, the mystery deepened. Because this wasn't just about a nameless dog saving a child. This was about a bond that ran deeper than chance. This was about 2 survivors, one human, one animal, who had found each other in the darkest of places. But how? Where did Harbor come from? What had the boy endured? And what kind of danger was still lurking out there, waiting to finish what it started? Detective Ruiz leaned against the wall, watching Harbor with narrowed eyes. "Dogs don't carry children out of the woods by accident," he muttered. "Somebody trained him. Somebody abandoned him. The question is why?" And that, dear listener, is the thread that would soon unravel everything. Because when they followed Harbor's trail back into the woods, what they found wasn't just a campsite. It was evidence of something far darker. Morning sunlight broke through gray clouds as Detective Jonah Ruiz stood outside Hudson Valley Medical Center, arms folded, his face set in stone. The boy, still unidentified, was stable but unconscious. The dog, now called Harbor, hadn't moved from the ICU glass in hours. But questions were piling up faster than answers. "Where did he come from?" Ruiz muttered to Ranger Amelia. Torres, a woman with boots still caked in mud, and eyes trained to read the land like a book. She had arrived at dawn, called in for her tracking expertise. Torres knelt beside Harbor, brushing mud off his battered paws. "He's seen miles," she said quietly. "Too many for just one night." She glanced at Ruiz. "This isn't random. He carried that boy for a reason." And so the decision was made, follow Harbor back into the woods. The forest stood at the hospital's edge like a wall of secrets. Tall pines, tangled undergrowth, the kind of place where shadows seemed thicker than light. Harbor limped ahead, his gait uneven but determined. Every so often he stopped, sniffed the ground, then pressed forward, glancing back as if to say, "Keep up." This way. The trail was brutal mud, sucking at their boots, thorny vines clawing at sleeves. But Harbor pressed on his nose close to the ground, tail, stiff eyes burning with focus. 40 minutes later, he stopped. Dead still. His head lowered, ears back. That's when they saw it. A clearing. At first glance, it looked abandoned. A torn tarp sagged from a tree limb. Cold ashes lay in a circle of stones where a fire once burned. Scattered trash, an empty can, a broken lighter hinted at someone living rough. But then Torres crouched near a log, her flashlight catching something dark smeared along the wood. She touched it with gloved fingers. Blood. Ruiz's chest tightened as he scanned the ground. That's when his eyes caught something small, half buried in the mud. He bent down, pulled it free. A child's sneaker. Pink, muddy, caked with blood. "Damn," he whispered. And then something worse. Carved deep into the bark of a nearby tree, 3 jagged words, "No way back." Torres exhaled slowly. Whoever did this didn't plan on returning. They searched the camp further, finding fragments of a torn map with a red circle around a small town miles west. A cracked burner phone, its screen shattered. And drawings. Childlike, frantic. A house with bars on the windows. A stick figure of a man with angry scribbles for eyes. This wasn't just a campsite. This was a prison. And Harbor. He hadn't just stumbled across it. He had lived here. Guarded here. Suffered here. Because near the fire pit, Ruiz noticed something else. An old rope, frayed, chewed through at the ends. Harbor sniffed it, ears flat, body trembling. The detective's gut twisted. They tied him here. Torres glanced at the Labrador, her voice low. He wasn't just a rescuer. He was a prisoner, too. By the time they returned to the hospital, Ruiz's mind was racing. He knew the name now, Ethan Cole, the boy's mother's ex-partner. History of assault, restraining orders, a trail of violence swept under the rug. A man who disappeared off the grid 3 weeks ago with a child in tow. Clara was waiting in the ICU when Ruiz broke the news. "Ethan Cole took him," Ruiz said. "He carved that message in the trees. He's not done." And that dog, he glanced at Harbor, who was still watching the boy through the glass. That dog stayed behind. He protected him when no one else did. Clara's throat tightened. "You mean Harbor?" She trailed off, looking at the Labrador in awe. He wasn't just saving him that night. He was saving him the whole time. For a moment, silence filled the room. Only the steady beeping of the monitor broke it. Then Ruiz leaned closer, voice low. "Dogs don't carry kids out of the woods by accident. That animal. He used to belong to someone. He's trained." Torres nodded. She had dug into old FEMA files. Her voice softened as she laid a faded photograph on the counter. A younger Labrador coat, shinier, posture perfect, sitting proudly beside a handler in a blue FEMA jacket. His name was Valor, a search and rescue dog lost in a mudslide 3 years ago, presumed dead. Clara picked up the photo, her hands trembling. She looked at the dog lying outside ICU, battered but unyielding. "You weren't done yet, were you?" she whispered. Harbor Valor lifted his head ears, flicking eyes meeting hers. And just like that, the mystery deepened again. Because if Harbor was once a hero dog, how had he ended up tied in the woods with a child? And more terrifying, if Ethan Cole was still out there. How long before he came back to finish what he started? Nights at Hudson Valley Medical Center usually settled into a strange rhythm. After midnight hallways dimmed, chatter softened, even the machines seemed to hum lower, as if the whole building was trying to breathe. But this night, there was no peace. Because somewhere in the city, Ethan Cole, the man whose shadow loomed over every bruise on the boy's body, was moving. He had shaved his beard, cut his hair, stolen a set of scrubs and an ID badge. On camera, he might have looked like a doctor headed to his shift. But behind his blank expression burned a desperation that smelled like gasoline waiting for a match. And he was walking straight toward the hospital. Inside, the boy, still unconscious, still fragile, lay connected to tubes and monitors in the ICU. Clara sat in a chair at his bedside, exhaustion pulling at her eyelids. On the floor, pressed tight against the glass wall, Harbor finally dozed, his breath shallow, his ribs rising unevenly from his wounds. Until his ears twitched. A sound. Faint footsteps. Too fast, too sharp, coming down the corridor. His head lifted, nose flaring, a low rumble forming deep in his chest. Clara frowned, glancing at him. "What is it, boy?" And then she heard it too, those hurried footsteps closing in. The door swung open, and Ethan Cole stepped inside. For a second, no one moved. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting a sterile glow on his scrubs. His eyes darted past Clara and locked on the boy. His lips curled in something that was neither a smile nor a frown, just hunger. Clara's instincts kicked in. She stood tall, planting herself between him and the bed. "You need to leave," she said firmly. Her voice shook, but her feet didn't move. Ethan's hand slid from behind the clipboard he carried, and the glint of a knife caught the light. That was all Harbor needed. The Labrador erupted. A guttural snarl ripped from his chest as he launched himself forward, a flash of muscle and fury. He struck Ethan square in the chest, knocking him back into the wall. The clipboard clattered to the floor, the knife slipped from his grip. Ethan roared, swinging wildly, punching, trying to pry Harbor off. But the dog's jaws had already clamped around his forearm, teeth locked like iron. Blood sprayed across the tiles as Ethan screamed. Clara slammed the emergency button on the wall. Alarms shrieked to life, red lights strobing down the corridor. Security to ICU now. The hallway erupted into chaos. Nurses screamed, officers thundered toward the noise. But Ethan fought like a man, cornered, dragging Harbor backward into the hallway, the dog's teeth sunk deep into flesh. His free hand scrambled for the knife on the floor, fingertips brushing the steel. "Drop it," an officer bellowed. Ethan's eyes burned with madness. He lunged, but Harbor held on. He wrenched the man's arm with such force that the blade skittered out of reach. Officers charged, tackling Ethan to the ground. It took 3 men to restrain him. And only then, only when the cuffs clamped shut, did Harbor release his grip. The Labrador stumbled back, muzzle smeared with blood, his body trembling, one leg barely holding his weight. Clara rushed to his side, dropping to her knees. Harbor. "It's okay. It's okay. You did it." Her hands pressed against his fur, feeling the tremors ripple through him. In the bed behind her, the boy stirred, awakened by the chaos. His eyes opened wide, glassy with fear-searching. When they landed on Harbor, his lips trembled. "Harbor," he whispered. The dog lifted his head weakly, ears twitching at the sound of his name. He took one shaky step toward the bed, then another. And then his body gave out. He collapsed onto the floor, blood trailing beneath him. Clara's heart cracked. No, no, no. Stay with me, boy. Stay with me. An hour later, Ethan Cole sat locked in a holding cell, his plan to vanish into the night shattered. Police found a duffel bag stashed in the stairwell, forged IDs, stolen meds, and at the very top, a folder filled with the boy's drawings. The first page showed a stick figure of a Labrador with the words scrawled in crayon, "My real friend." Back upstairs, Harbour lay in an exam room hooked to fluids, his breath shallow. A veterinarian from the county had been called in, shaking her head. "He's not registered, no microchip. Surgery's risky, and technically, he's still a stray." But Clara didn't hesitate. She squared her shoulders, eyes blazing. "Bill it to me." The vet blinked. "Excuse me, I said bill it to me. Whatever it costs. He's not just a dog. He's family." The room fell silent. And for the first time that night, Harbour wasn't fighting alone. But the fight wasn't over. Because while Harbour's body struggled to survive, another battle loomed. Child Services had arrived. And they had one cold announcement ready: the boy will be placed in foster care. And the animal cannot accompany him. Clara's jaw clenched. He's not going anywhere without Harbour. But the agents only offered sympathetic looks, the kind that meant rules, not hearts, were making the decisions. And that's when Clara realized the fight to save Harbour's life was only half the battle. The real fight was to keep him where he belonged. The hours after surgery felt endless. Clara sat in the waiting room, eyes fixed on the double doors, her heart pounding like a war drum. The boy Liam curled against her side under a blanket, silent, but holding one of Harbour's blood-stained bandages like it was treasure. Finally, the vet emerged. Pale, exhausted, but with a weary smile. "He's one tough dog," she said softly. He pulled through. Clara closed her eyes, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Beside her, Liam clutched the bandage tighter and whispered, "I knew he wouldn't leave me." Recovery wasn't easy. Harbour limped, ribs-bound walks kept short. Liam battled nightmares, clinging to Harbour at night, as though the dog's heartbeat was the only anchor pulling him back from the dark. And yet, light began to seep in. One morning, Clara walked into the living room to find Liam giggling, as Harbour, now sporting a bright red bandana, tried to balance a peanut butter-covered spoon on his nose. Weeks later, she watched from the porch as Liam pedaled shakily down the driveway on a bike, Harbour, trotting proudly beside him, tail wagging with every wobble. The scars hadn't vanished, but laughter had returned. Then one summer afternoon, Ranger Amelia Torres knocked on their door. She carried a brown envelope and a curious smile. "I think you'll want to see this," she said. Inside was a faded photograph, a younger Labrador coat, gleaming, eyes sharp, standing tall beside a FEMA handler in a rescue vest. His name stitched clearly on the collar tag, Valor. Clara's throat tightened. "He wasn't done yet," she whispered. Liam studied the picture quietly, then turned to the dog sprawled on the carpet, his eyes half closed, tail thumping at the sound of his voice. "Do you want to be Valor again?" Liam asked. The Labrador raised his head, blinked once, and wagged his tail. Liam smiled. "I think you're still Harbour, because that's who carried me out. That's who stayed. That's who saved me." And just like that, the name was sealed. Weeks later, Clara, Liam, and Harbour drove to the lake on the first day of summer. The sun dipped golden across the water, cicadas buzzing in the trees. Liam threw a stick into the shallows, shouting, "Go get it!" Harbour bounded forward, splashing through the waves, his limp barely noticeable now. When he returned, dripping and proud, Liam threw his arms around his neck. "You're not just my best friend," he whispered. "You're my always." Clara watched them, heart swelling, and she realized the truth: sometimes family isn't about bloodlines or paperwork. Sometimes family is simply who refuses to leave your side, who fights for you, carries you when you can't walk, and waits outside your door no matter how long it takes. That night, as the sun slipped low and fireflies sparked in the grass, Clara stroked Harbour's fur and whispered, "Thank you. For carrying him. For carrying us." And the Labrador, once a stray, once a soldier, once presumed dead, closed his eyes, and breathed in the peace he had finally found. Because sometimes heroes don't wear uniforms. Sometimes they walk on four legs. If Harbor's story touched you, imagine how many real dogs are waiting in shelters right now, ready to give that same loyalty, that same love to someone who needs them. If you believe dogs are more than pets, their family hit that like button. Share this story with a friend who loves animals, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the unspoken bond between humans and the animals who save us in ways we can't always explain. Because somewhere out there tonight, another harbor is waiting.